herself wrote wonderful piano music and actually was able to make quite a good living off of her compositions, and deservedly so.
Thank you, Barbara. Morning, friends and strangers. Welcome to Summit Sunday morning service. My name is Jenny Sarr. I'm standing in for Nancy Merrill. I'll be your service associate today. Thank you for joining us here in person and on Zoom. I raise up my voice, not so that I can shout, but so that those without a voice can be heard. We cannot all succeed when half of us are held back. Malala Yousafzai. Okay. We're glad that you've decided to join us today. If you're new to Summit or Unitarian Universalism, you can visit our website, where you will find out that Summit is a liberal religious community bound together by shared principles drawn from world religions, humanist teachings, nature and science, philosophy, and personal practices. We aspire to be a religion of love and inclusion. The mission of Summit is to commit ourselves to building a more compassionate, just, and sustainable world. Our website is summitUU.org. We wish to acknowledge that our fellowship resides on unceded Kumeyaay land, and that for 10,000 years this land has been and continues to be home to the Kumeyaay people. We recognize the violent history of the colonization of California and honor the continuing presence of the Kumeyaay Nation. Any announcements today besides Pastor Casey? I think that's it.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. There we go. I know, mornings are early. My name is Casey Marie Pandell. I am the minister here at Summit. Whether it is your first visit or your 5,000th visit, you are whole, you are holy, you are loved, and you are so welcome here. Very briefly, our covenant group signups for next year have already begun. Please reach out to Laura Lisa Gainsborough or myself to get on the list. We're looking for participants, both seasoned and new, and we are looking for facilitators as well. So if you think you would like to participate and lead one of the groups, please let Laura Lisa and I know. Our plan is to have our first session start right out the gate in September, as soon as I get back. So get on the list so we can get you set up in your groups. Friendly reminder that our beloved Reverend Tom Owen Toll's final sermon at Summit will be next Sunday. It is his farewell sermon before he heads up to Santa Barbara to go live with his daughter. Please, please, please make sure you take some time today in the salon after service to leave a message for him. Joanne has a beautiful scrapbook that she's working on of memories and pictures and all sorts of things of how cemeterians and friends have felt about Tom over the years. So if there's something you'd like to share with him, please make sure you take the time to do that today. I'll be doing that myself. Tom was the first UU minister that ever spoke to me apart from my home minister. I still remember when I met him for the first time, and he looked at me and he said, "It's good to have you here." He was also very, very supportive when I told him I went to seminary, so near and dear to my heart as well. And that's me.
Shuffling of papers, there it is. We kindle our chalice flame this morning, awakening the fire of our ancestors in our hearts. Beacon of freedom held out to light the way, light of reason illuminating the path, spark of courage igniting our spirits, aglow with hope for all we endeavor to do together. Holy flame of times past, brighten this present moment, that we may be the love that is our center and our foundation both. Blessed be. Please rise as you are willing and able to sing the UU hymn, which is somewhere. The words are, well, whatever.
Love be the spirit of this fellowship, and the quest for truth be its sacrament, and service be its prayer, to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, and to help one another in fellowship. This is our aspiration.
Summit meeting after service. So if you are new to Summit and you'd like to get to know more about us and about Unitarian Universalism, we'll see you in the library at 11:30. Thank you, Jim. Yes, lunch is provided. Our reading today are words from Nathan Ryan entitled God Manifest. Quoting Ralph Waldo Emerson, he says, "To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment." I was on the window seat of a flight when I saw God manifest. It took a while. At first, I had my headphones in, reading a book, when 3 young women sat near me, all of them wearing the clothing with the Harvard insignia. They introduced themselves and described how they were studying and what they planned to do when they graduated. These college students didn't seem interested in what others had to say. It sounded more like they were trying to out-jockey each other for the position and prestige to prove that they were smarter, more accomplished, or more worthy of studying at Harvard. After about an hour into the flight, 2 of the young women had fallen asleep, and the third studied the other 2 to make sure that they were completely asleep. Then unzipped her bag and pulled out a package of double stuffed Oreos. She removed 2 Oreos and, looking around again, carefully unscrewed each of the cookies. She took the 2 cookies that still had cream on them and mashed them together to make a quadruple stuffed Oreo. She looked back at both of her peers to confirm that they were still asleep and took a bite. I began to imagine this young woman as a little girl loving double stuffed Oreos and asking her parents why they didn't make quadruple stuffed Oreos. I imagined her parents telling her that Oreos aren't healthy and forbidding her to eat them. Now, on the plane, she is finally free from the constrictions of childhood, finally free to eat her quadruple stuffed Oreo. But I saw the caution that she used. Did she feel shame because our culture projects so much onto the way women look? Or did she not want to share? Did she fear that her peers and possible competitors would see her? Whatever the explanation, I also saw a woman surrounded by the pressures to conform to adulthood, being the adult she always wanted to be when she was a child. She was as God made her, not who everyone else wanted her to be. I got to see God manifest. Spirit of life and love, all that is known and unknown, please help us shed all that tells us we are not allowed to be as you made us to be. Help us love this world and its people. Welcome to worship. Please rise in mind, body, and spirit as you are able to sing hymn 51 in our gray hardback hymnal, Lady of the Season's Laughter.
Speaking of your gray hardback hymnal, I encourage you to look at this one. There is an introduction that I play. It's short, but it comes between every verse. So, and I will try to help just with the beginning of each verse since we don't have a song leader, just so we know when to start singing. But like I said, between the verses, there's just this tiny little interlude that's the exact same thing that I play at the beginning. Give you guys a minute to look it up. 51.
As always, thanks for trying out something new, folks. Man, those sharps got me. I was not expecting them. I looked at the music, totally missed the sharps. Now is the time in our community gathering where we spend our energy and our love holding each other in our most tender places. Our joys and concerns can be emailed or texted to me throughout the week, or maybe handwritten up near the chancel on Sunday mornings. Whether you share your joy or concern out loud, you are always welcome to light a candle. We've got a few today. The first one I would like to share is from Sarah Duvall. Sarah would like to share her joy that she has an art exhibition coming up on May 2nd through the 23rd, starting on May 4th in El Cajon. So if you have any questions about it and you'd like to support a local artist, you can speak with Sarah. She would love to help you out with that. Jenny would like to share a joy in gratitude for the music of Peter Gabriel, especially the latest album, I.O. Thank you. It's music about living, about aging, and the interdependence of life on our planet, and all about love and forgiveness. Thank you for sharing that, Jenny. Eleanor and Jim would like to share that today is Lucas's 25th birthday. Happy birthday from all the way over here, Lucas. Mary would like to share that her middle child, Anya, and their spouse, Isaac, just celebrated their 4th wedding anniversary. Anya grew up in this congregation. Anya is a big part of us, and we send many blessings for many, many years of happiness for the Martinez Vale couple, family. And finally, I saved this one for last because it's a big one. Carol and Wendell Rollins have been moved to hospice care. Wendell is already staying with their daughter, Carrie, and Carol will be joining on Monday. We ask that you keep them in your hearts and your prayers and your thoughts. If you'd like to send a card, the appropriate address is found in the Summit e-news. I know that the Rollinses have been a major part of this community for such a long time. We hold them, and I hold all of you who are close to them in our hearts. Whether spoken or unspoken, we hold your joys in us as we go through our week. And I would like to invite Mary Carter Vale for our Time for All Ages, and our young at heart are welcome to join us.
Yes, come on up. Anybody who wants to be up here. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Look at all these folks here. Come on up, guys. Hi, good morning. How is everybody? Hi. So I have a question for you, and there is no right or wrong answer here. Who likes a hug? Some people like a hug. Who thinks hugging is a lot of invasion of their personal space? Both are fine. So when I grew up, my dad, we used to go into like these spaces and he would go, uh-oh, here come those touchy-feely people. You know the touchy-feely people? They're the people that just come up and go, ugh! They just grab you and hug without asking. And have you ever been told, give your auntie a hug or your grandma a hug or give a kiss to somebody? Has that ever been something that was told to you growing up? I don't know so much of our younger folk. I remember being told that, yeah. So hugging is something that kind of gets really close into your body, and it's touching somebody else's body. Shouldn't that be something we ask about first? Yeah. And what's the correct answer when somebody says, "Can I have a hug?" What's the correct answer? Well, please is a good. That's a good word to use. But is there a correct answer when somebody says, "Can I have a hug?" Well, yes is one answer, but is no okay? Yeah, no's okay. Because whose body is it that's getting hugged? It's your body, right? And it's okay to say no. And if somebody comes up and says, "Can I have a hug?" and you say no, are you hurting their feelings? Well, it might feel that way, but honestly, you're telling them that you really care about who you are and you care about yourself. You're saying, "I'm important. I can give you a handshake. How about a fist bump?" Or we can do a crisp high five or an airplane. Do you know what an airplane is? That's one. I mean, we do all of these. These are things we do at camp. But the wonderful thing about knowing that this is your body is that you get to make choices about it. And it's okay to say no to a hug. It's also okay to say yes. Those are your choices. So one of the things I like to say when I had a teacher do this with my kids, and it just stuck with me that I still use it. The teacher said to my son when he was in first grade, "Would you like a hug or a handshake?" And I was like, wow, how respectful. All bodies, no matter how old they are, deserve respect. And I've talked about the tickle monster before. Getting tickled. Does the tickle monster. So remember the tickle monster, you get to say stop. And the tickle monster needs to stop and take a pause. Because again, respecting your body, right? Well, that might be an agreement that you have with the tickle monster. That's okay as well, too. So can I have a hug or would you like a hug? That's an invitation, right? Would you like one? And if somebody says no, it's just like saying, "I don't want a piece of chocolate cake because I just finished eating." It's okay to say no. Doesn't mean I don't love you. It doesn't mean I think you're yucky or you didn't shower. It just means no, thank you. It's just like saying no, thank you to some food that you don't like or to an event that's not feeling fun right now. So what do we say when I say, "Can I have a hug?" We can say no. Did that hurt my feelings? Not at all. Nope, I respect that. Thank you, Rinsler. It was perfect. So good modeling. So I want to invite, we're starting our OWL class for our fourth through sixth grade kids, or that general age zone. And one of the things that we teach in OWL is that we care for our bodies. Oh, OWL is Our Whole Lives. It's the cradle to grave sexual health program that Unitarian Universalists and United Church of Christ offer. It's also secular, so almost in first. We have all kinds of grades here. But this is a really important program because it helps us to learn about how to respect ourselves and hold boundaries that are healthy, right? Yeah, because your body's important, and it's important to take good care of it, and it's important to be able to say no and to say yes. And knowing how to do that is what we model. So thank you, guys. Can we do want to do our little chalice? Let's do our little affirmation, and then we're going to do our song. So those of you that don't know it can help, and those that don't, it goes like this. We are Unitarian, Universalists, a people of open minds, loving hearts, and helping hands. And now we're going to have a song, and we're going to head off to our classrooms. We're going to explore nature today.
Please rise in mind, body, or spirit to help us sing our next hymn, 1026, in the softback teal hymnal, "If Every Woman in the World."
Every
please join me in a time of silent prayer, meditation, or reflection as I read words from Sarah Sutherland Dean entitled, "My Heart Fights for Those Who Can't Fight." Someone has called me a bleeding heart liberal. It was not intended as a compliment. However, I will always consider it one of the biggest compliments of my life. My heart bleeds for the underdog. My heart fights for those who cannot fight. My heart rejoices in seeing others overcome adversity. My heart desires love and peace for everyone. My heart is compassionate and empathetic. My heart sees pain in others and wants to help. My heart believes in equality. My heart sees the good in people. My heart chooses action over fear. I am a bleeding heart liberal. I had a pretty interesting epiphany as I began researching the topic for today's sermon, one that became an odd little microcosm of exactly the subject. Throughout this liberation theology series, and in short, in case you don't know what liberation theology is, it's the theology that God is always in the corner of the oppressed people, never the oppressor. We've got one more after today, by the way. But I've been working with Stacy Floyd M. Thomas and Anthony B. Pinn's Liberation Theologies of the United States, an introduction. And I began my research naturally on today's subject with feminist liberation theology. It's called women's work for a reason. It felt like a logical starting point, the first branch of the tree, if you will. The essay, written by Mary McClintock Fulkerson, is a whopping 12 pages long and focuses mostly on the history of how this particular theology came to be. In similar vein to the LGBT theology that we spoke about a few weeks ago, there are deeply political underpinnings in this theology, much more about the politics than the actual theology. Reading about it felt kind of like learning the history of feminism, which I'll get to, I promise. But womanist liberation theology, on the other hand, which is supposed to be the second half of this sermon, twice as long. At first, I was surprised that these two essays were not closer in length, but once I started reading Floyd Thomas's essay, I suddenly wasn't so surprised. There's just so much more in womanism, more than I could possibly guess without the very clear perspective of the Black female lens. But let me go back. An important note is that feminism is a borrowed term. Up until we pilfered it from the Brits in 1913, who yoinked it from the French, where it had been in common usage since the 1880s, the beginning of the movement stateside to this point had been known as the woman movement, and included not just women's suffrage, but equality across the board in all aspects of life for women. Over the next 40 years, the movement would come to include embracing the gifts that women bring, and truly came to a head as what we in some spaces know more colloquially as woman's lib, once women's sexuality and bodily autonomy became an important part of the conversation. The second wave of feminism in the 60s added the concerns of women being given equal access in work, protection from sexual exploitation and other various inequalities, and becoming increasingly more radicalized. These political struggles were mainstream, but there were religious influences at play that mirrored the political climate, with authors such as Valerie Saving and Mary Daly being two prominent theologians raising their voices against what they saw as the historical patriarchal leanings of the Christian faith. Though it's important to note that women's interpretation of Protestantism going back to the 19th century is actually the starting point. Such theology was crucial for faith-based activism. In 1974, the Philadelphia 11, the first women ordained in the Episcopal Church as priests, were ordained illegally. This ordination was met with threats of violence, but in the end, the 11 ordinees were granted the laying of hands and were irregularly ordained, whether the church liked it or not. Their ordination would inspire 4 more Episcopal priests, as well as the 1975 gathering of the Roman Catholic Women's Ordination Conference. This conference would go on to be the source for illegally ordaining female Catholic priests and became the basis for the practice of women's church communities in Catholicism, focusing on the inherent spirituality of women and worship geared specifically for them. This theology has always and continues to focus on decentering patriarchal norms in the Christian faith and embracing the wholeness of what it means to be a woman. Perspectives differ, and there are both liberal and conservative readings of the theology, stemming from the experience of sexism in the lives of women. While Mary Daly considered Christianity incurably patriarchal, others disagreed and call for Christianity and society as a whole in secular and sacred spaces to see women, name women, address sexism as a sin, and to imagine a world free from sexism. Noteworthy is the evangelist feminist who considers the Bible, when interpreted correctly, to be in equal support of men and women. After all, Miriam, sister to Moses and Adam, was a prophet. Jesus revealed himself not to a man first, but to Mary Magdalene after the resurrection. So clearly, the Bible sees a strong place of leadership for women. But of course, perhaps you've noticed the very surface use of the term women. Women's experience of sexism, of being subordinate to men, but whose experience? Because one thing that liberation theology from the feminist sphere lacks is perspective, by which I mean the focus is primarily, has always been, and continues to be, on middle and upper class white women. Going back into the 1800s, the argument centered on the dominant culture. While in more recent years, the theology has spoken more to the intersectionality needed to dismantle oppressions of all types, early theologians noted a need, but never really examined their own complicity in it. And still, it takes time to get to these places. And unfortunately, sometimes when we're uncomfortable, we shy away from some of the more complex nature. Here we find the seeds of various feminist theologies outside of feminism. We have Mujerista, which is Hispanic women's liberation theology. There's Native American feminist. There's Asian American feminist, all with their own histories and contexts. Today, we're focusing specifically on the Black woman's experience. While speaking about this sermon with my landlady, she asked me curiously, why the separation? What's the point? Great question, Susan, and it's one that I hope enough of you in here are asking as well. If you recall, in February, I preached a sermon on Black liberation theology, and that theology was critiqued for its lack of female representation. For similar reasons, womanism has become a deeply necessary and important branch of this theology. Black theology centers on the experience of Black men. Feminist on white women, almost exclusively affluent and educated. Where is the space for the experiences, the pain, the exploration of Black women? Floyd Thomas shares the history leading up to this distinction, explaining that the roots of the split go deep into the antebellum South, where the white women of society were held to impossible standards of purity, while the bodies of enslaved Black women were commodified Indeed, much of the negative perception of Black women that still pervades society today dates back to this time, where the response from power-adjacent white women was to further diminish Black bodies as much as possible. The demonization and erasure of Black women continued into the next century and into our current one, where we see the ideas and the labors of Black women in the civil rights movement and other political spheres co-opted by white women and Black men. Their voices often silenced. You'll forgive me a moment, I hope, to lament a shortcoming I found in this sermon at about 9 o'clock last night when I was still working on it. See, my initial study of these theologies led me to believe that I could give equal, ample exploration to both womanist and feminist theologies. And that turned out to be something of a rookie mistake. I could pen multiple sermons on womanism alone, and so to avoid becoming a prolonged dissertation, I'll focus a little less on the history of womanism and more on the discourse surrounding it. The biggest key to womanism is the centering of the experience of Black women, not the stories told about them or the expectations that we have put on them as a society, but the actual lived experiences, the ways that Black women move in the world, the ways that they respond to and thrive in it, often in the face of myriad oppressions, abuses of their bodies, and denigration of their skills. This understanding is absolutely crucial. Womanist liberation theology does not and cannot exist without the lived experience of a Black woman. Author Alice Walker defines a womanist, which is to say a grown Black woman, courageous, audacious, and wanting to know more than may be good for her. A Black woman who loves women in any or all senses, who loves Black women's culture, loves joy, loves the struggle, loves the spirit and food and roundness and everything about herself. In other words, a Black woman who knows and is known for the fullness of her humanity. Walker likens the following: a womanist is to a feminist as purple is to lavender. Adjacent, but still different, and a marvel all its own. Womanism stems from this definition, but also highlights not simply the historical stymieing of Black women's voices, the expectation of surrogacy and sacrifice, but the various other intersectional pieces of race, class, and gender. Womanist theologians found that neither academia nor their churches protected them, and found themselves ridiculed, their qualifications questioned, and saw very little place to turn that highlighted and valued their understandings and experiences of the world. The adage, "if you want something done right," comes to mind, and that's exactly what wominists have done. Using ingrained Black family values and virtues, leaning into the moral teachings of Black churches, the notion that, quote, trouble doesn't last, and the belief that God is not only in charge, but unequivocally, without question, always on the side of the oppressed. The womanist tradition is one of hope. It uses the method of thinking, being, doing. You think the thing, you be the thing, you do the thing. It is a foundation not to save the world, as I, and I'm sure many of you in this room have heard, or maybe said, Black women will save the world. This theology doesn't set them up to save the world. No, it sets them up to be able to inspire all oppressed people to strive and achieve great things. Womanism, though deliberately centering on the experience and success of Black women, also strives for the betterment of the Black community at large. The womanist seeks transformation in relationships through partnership, through connection, through hope, through community, far from the destruction and self-sacrifice expected of her. The methodology requires the integration of race, gender, and class all together to deconstruct the world and faith that oppresses her, examining her suffering and sin through the lenses and often glossed over by these previous theologies. At its heart, womanism demands that Black women be seen in their fullness as humans. It does not ask this permission from us. It demands that their ultimate reality not be suffering. For its part as a deconstruction of faith, womanism's focus has largely been on Christianity, what Floyd Thomas calls one of the most important tools of Eurocentric patriarchal oppression. Womanists take texts historically used to harm Black bodies and seek to uplift positive, affirming, and liberative pieces within them. Womanist writings have been used to address the sins of Black women in ways not acknowledged anywhere else, and the theology honors and holds sacred the lives and experiences of them. It insists on intersectionality, seeing each oppression as a thread of a greater whole, all playing on one another in a large scheme of oppression. And while Walker explains what a womanist is, the womanism theology explains what it is to be a womanist. It is deliberate centering. It's a refusal to be marginalized. It is the audacity to claim a place, a voice, and knowledge in the world. It affirms the importance of loving connections, understanding the unique ways in which Black women have created, nurtured, sustained, and liberated each other and others. It is Black women supporting and nurturing each other, taking younger women under their wing. It is shared legacy. It's about knowing, understanding, and being willing to do the work of reconstruction, doing it holistically and recognizing the unique aspects of Black female experience that has led to survival, thriving, and push for liberation. Now, there are two pressing issues with womanism currently being addressed by theologians. First, Walker defines womanism. Womanist theology focuses on the Christian church, calls that the appropriation of Walker's term ignores her deliberate use of the term spirit. These calls have led to reflection and discussion around religious plurality and the wonderings if this theology rejects or ignores other faiths. Current scholars insist that there is room for all spiritual perspectives within womanism. Second, womanist theology has been born largely in the halls of white seminaries. A disconnect is found when taking the academic into the real world. And in response, in recent years, there have been efforts to have made both the theology more accessible to a wider audience and to write theologically specifically for lay people within the church. I particularly like Walker leaning into feminism and womanism as purple to lavender. It highlights the commonality of both schools of thought and faith, but it also recognizes the individuality of each. It's a little surface, and I think it lacks some critical nuance, but it makes a salient point. Womanism cannot exist without feminism, true, but it also searches deeper, more hopefully, and more completely than feminism alone. Womanism also invites genuine, intentional seekers outside of the Black female perspective to join in the discourse, to seek this liberation collectively. But it does not go quietly, nor should it, as it demands that these voices, so historically silenced, be upheld and given the same sacredness and space so often given to others, because it has been a hard-won wisdom. A wisdom steeped in love in the face of adversity, and the embodiment of joy and wholeness of life in spirit in every facet of life. A wisdom, a joyful wholeness that I think we could all learn a thing or two from. A wisdom and a joyful wholeness that should be uplifted. And if we do that, it might just help liberate us all. So may it be, and amen.
Thank you, Casey. There's a lot to think about. We'll have a good discussion afterwards. I hope some people will stay for that. Let us quiet our minds and hearts. Our Sunday morning offering is a gift that provides Summit UU Fellowship the financial resources to help build a better world together. The smallest gift is welcome. For those of you on Zoom, the link can be found in the chat box. Please select the Sunday plate option to allocate your donation. Barbara.
So I'm going to be playing two pieces by composer Valerie Capers, and I did not know that womanism was going to be part of the conversation today, but it turns out this composer she's living, she's 88 years old, and she is African American, and she's also blind. So she had a lot of challenges that came to her after she was the first blind person to get a master's degree from Juilliard, which is like basically the premier music school in the country. It was afterwards, though. It was the 1960s, and people didn't want to hire her because she was blind. Nonetheless, she persisted. She did eventually get, find work and make a name for herself, and is very worth looking up if you feel like checking Wikipedia later. These are little preludes. They are tributes. The first one is not quiet at all. It is a tribute to Thelonious Monk, and the second one is quiet and sweet to Billie Holiday.
Hello. Yep, there we go. Thanks, Barbara. That was fantastic. Thank you all for being here today. Listen, I'm trying to think of a description for today. It was interesting and mind-opening and hopefully heart-opening. Okay, we're going to have our closing circle song, and then we'll have a 5-minute break, after which we will have a discussion of the topic today. Wait, oh, the hymn, sorry, I knew, okay, somewhere in there. Oh. Number 12 in Songs of Grace book that should have been on your seat or is nearby.
And for those of you that don't know, Grace McLaren is Mary's mother. So she's a member of our community, a very important member of the Unitarian Universalist Club. And we're connected to it.
You know, I've got my book open here. This is number 12. And I'm just going to go ahead and read this because I think it's worth in the context of today, hearing what she had to say. It says, this song was commissioned to celebrate the 10th anniversary of First Unitarian's Women Together annual weekend retreat. At the time I was working on it, my daughter Mary introduced me to feminist spirituality with terms like maiden, mother, and crone, and the elements of earth, air, fire, and water. Some of the words were sketched out as I sat listening to Starhawk. Some of them simply came from my own experience of finding my own truth. The song has become a touchstone for the women of my church. While it is certainly a woman-affirming song, woman-affirming men are encouraged to sing along. Again, 1, 2, it's gonna go, come from the dark, 1, 2, ready, go. Come from the dark night of mystery, come through the light. You have the power for change, we sing the wonder of women, the beauty of womanhood. We are the ones together, we sing ages and colors, and we make out that there's worth. Celebrate all that you are. We sing the wonder of women, the beauty of womanhood. We are the ones together.
Yay! I happened to be counting you all when I was sitting there, and there are 23 women and 13 men. So there you are. And we're all good. Everybody's good. Okay. Benediction. Step aside. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry.
I struggled a lot with this sermon this week. I don't normally tell you guys pretty loudly when I struggle. I try not to anyway. I think it's interesting that my white perspective looked at these theologies and went, I can do them both in one day. It showed a critical lack of understanding of how important other people's experiences are. Not just Black women, not just white men, but everyone's. That's the point of liberation theology. It's not just knowing that God is on the side of the oppressed. It is knowing that we are all sacred, that we all have a place here. The point of liberation theology stems from an understanding of our experience and learning from others. So while I'm unsatisfied with today, I think it's one of those times where a failure is still a success. because I learned some really important things, not just about this specific theology, but about how I move in the world and how I want to help you move in the world in this community. So from what you can take from this really big sermon today, take this. The sacredness of each of our experiences matters. The understanding of the sacredness of others' experiences will change the world. Amen, shalom, salam, namaste, ashe, and blessed be. Go now in peace. May the light within you be a blessing to the world.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And we'll sing our closing circle song. We still don't have the words for that up on the screen, but they're easy.
And thank you, Tech. Thank you so much to our Tech. Oh, yeah. You can't possibly tell me that I've stunned you all into silence for once. Chris has it.
For your wonderful attempt, blessing. That is a massive topic. And, one of the things too, I brought a poem of mine to share today, and I think it relates to the theme of women, but it also very much relates to everything we've been being with all this past month: nature, Earth Day, interdependence. And I would also just like to say briefly before I read my poem is that we think about feminine or women, it is from many cultures, indigenous, Eastern, ancient cultures, it is the receptivity, it is the being part of all of us, and the masculine being the doing part of us. Together they do the form making, but we all have those energies within us, masculine and feminine, and they're constantly finding new ways to come together, to bridge. And we're not just talking about sexuality, we're talking about our whole being. So I think when you say that every life matters, and this is addressed to this, it's called Drink Life. Drink life from the question born in the perfume of the wood's decay, the spicy kiss of the fool. Drink life born of yesterday's easy breath, the caramel air still warm and lingering in your heart. Drink life from the question born in the stars that breathe their echoes, reflecting in your eyes, the rhythms of the oceans, the bleeding fires willing their ways through your liquid and bones, leaving you the word women to wear, freeing you to be naked poetry. Thank you.
In the book of Genesis, the creation by God of Adam and then Eve, rather than Eve first and then Adam, is that sexist?
I suppose that depends what interpretation you're asking and who you're asking. And also then it kind of gets into like the chicken or the egg question. I think sometimes, I know you're kind of kidding, but I think sometimes those questions are a little complicated because we have to think about who wrote those texts and what they meant. I had a professor at seminary who was getting, last I checked, was getting his PhD in ancient Greek. He learned ancient Greek and ancient Hebrew so he could translate the Bible from his own interpretation, because he understood that everything in our sacred text comes down to our experience and the lens that we're seeing it within and how we read the text. So I think it's I don't know that I'll be learning ancient Greek anytime soon to try that for myself, but I appreciate what he did with it. And he was one of the best professors I had all of seminary. It was really enlightening.
Jim, that was a good question. When I first thought of it, I thought, yeah, maybe it is a little sexist. But then I thought, you know what? He made Eve second because he needed perfection and someone to protect the world.
So my challenge today was with color. And I have identified myself as a feminist since I was really, really young. I remember being, I think maybe in fourth grade when I first encountered, the idea of using Ms. instead of Miss or Mrs. And I was like, yes, even just as a young child, I thought, oh, this is me. There's something here for me. And I've always thought of my feminism as maybe neon green or, screaming hot pink if it has to be in the pink family. And not lavender. I'm not something pastel. And I mean, for me, feminism is big and bold and freeing. And I would like to think that the term does not exclude women of color, and I'd never heard the term womanism, and it's wonderful, whole new thing to open up. But just my feminism has always included not only all of the women of the world, but all of the men too, because there are plenty of men who identify as feminists, and I think a lot of them are in this congregation, and thank you to all of them.
So thank you very much for all that you put into that sermon. I know it was a lot on a lot of levels.
More than I thought.
What you said at the end, kind of the coda, could you say more about that? I felt like that kind of made the bridge between the intellectual and the heart spiritual. And I found that very compelling. All of it was very compelling, but that kind of made the circle whole for me.
So there's this, there's something called the IDI. It is the oh shoot, I'm going to get it wrong. The Intercultural Development Inventory. And what it tells us when we take it is where on a spectrum of understanding other people is. By and large, Unitarian Universalists, when they take it, because we had to take it in seminary, start off in a place called minimization. And what minimization is the idea that we all bleed red. We're all the same at heart. So why does it matter what our differences are? But we understand that when we're the dominant culture, that it's easy to have that perspective and it's easy to miss things. That's how I felt today, thinking, I can do this one sermon in one go and get everything taken care of. When you expose yourself to the art, the culture, the faith of other people, whether they look exactly like you, but their faith is different, or they look completely different from you and come from a completely different place, we're learning to connect on ways that I don't think we can put words to. I think that's why art and things like the art and music are so transcendental for people, because that's one of those times where we can see ourselves in everyone else and still acknowledge the differences. So when I say that knowing our own experiences matters, but knowing the experiences of others will change the world, I think that's how we get men who become feminists. That's how we get people who have never understood poverty to understand deeply what poverty is like. And it's the intentional searching for the commonality within experiences, I think, that makes a big difference for how we grow our spirituality. Because I think we have to do it with our whole heart and soul for it to make a difference. Sitting here and hearing me explain to you what womanism is great if you can follow it. It was a little tough for me too, but it was understanding how the lens of the Black woman's experience was critical to even having any perspective on what the Bible looked like, what other texts looked like. That's where it really mattered. So I think in a really simple way, when we're sharing our experiences, we're sharing our souls in ways that we don't get to do outside of those moments. And I think that's where some of the really important pluralistic work that we do as UUs can be, where we can stop being up here and be in here.